So the next item on the agenda is a decision item on the regulatory document REGDOC-2.2.4, fitness for duty, which is outlined in CMD 17 M35 and M35A. So I understand before we get to staff presentation that we have somebody joining us via teleconference. Mr. Harris, can you hear us? Checking technology, always a good idea. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris is not with us?
I'll inform you when.
Okay, we'll let you know when he joins us. I understand that CNSC staff, it says here Ms. Owen Whitford, but it's not you. So go ahead, please.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, membres de la Commission. My name is Greg Lamar. I'm the Director General of the Directorate of Safety Management. With me today are Ms. Karen Owen Whitford, Director of the Regulatory Framework Division, Mr. Brian Torrey, Director General of the Regulatory Policy Directorate, André Bouchard, Director of the Human and Organizational Performance Division, Linda Hunter and Aaron Derouin, who are Human and Organizational Factor Specialists in Monsieur Bouchard's division. In addition to the CNSC subject matter experts, several consultants and specialists are with us today to support CNSC staff in answering some of the technical questions the Commission may have with respect to fitness for duty. So to my right, first let me introduce Dr. Albert Fraser. Dr. Fraser received his PhD in biochemistry in 1976, is certified by the American Board of Forensic Toxicology as a forensic toxicologist, and is certified in Canada and the US as a clinical biochemist and clinical chemist, respectively. Aside from his extensive scholarly record, most noteworthy is the fact that Dr. Fraser is trained as a laboratory inspector for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, and has conducted over 70 inspections of SAMHSA accredited laboratories in both Canada and the US. Next to him, Mr. James Wigmore worked for over 29 years as a forensic alcohol toxicologist at the Centre of Forensic Sciences in Toronto. Mr. Wigmore has testified in over 700 criminal cases throughout Canada in personal injury civil cases and coroner's inquests. In 2005, he was awarded the prestigious Jerome Award from the Canadian Society of Forensic Science in recognition of outstanding contributions in the field of forensic science. He's also author of the book titled Wigmore on Alcohol. Next to him, Dr. Ronald Davidson is a medical physician with extensive qualifications, training, and experience in occupational and aviation medicine, including 29 years of service to the Canadian Forces Medical Services. In 2005, Dr. Davidson retired as colonel in the medical branch of the Canadian Forces Medical Services and as a board-certified aerospace medicine specialist. In his last military assignment, he was the medical advisor to the Chief of Air Staff and aviation medical advisor to the Minister of National Defense. As we move to the next row behind them, Dr. Amy Porath, Director of the Research and Policy Division at the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse, CCSA, and is responsible for ensuring that CCSA advances knowledge in the substance use field to inform policies and professional practice. In 2008, Dr. Porath received a PhD in psychology and has focused her research program for the past 16 years on substance use issues, specifically in the areas of cannabis, drug-impaired driving, and the Drug Evaluation and Classification Program. Next to her, Ms. Shauna Meister is a research and policy analyst with the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction and conducts research on substance use affecting the workplace and on problematic alcohol use on campuses. Prior to joining CCSA, Ms. Meister conducted research projects in Canada and the United States on human behavior and road safety, including alcohol-impaired driving. Finally, Dr. Doug Baroness currently serves as a Senior Research Associate with CCSA and is a member of the Drugs and Driving Committee of the Canadian Society of Forensic Science. Dr. Baroness received his PhD in psychology, specializing in alcohol studies. Throughout his career, he's participated in and published numerous experimental and epidemiological studies in a variety of areas such as drug and alcohol impaired driving, the Drug Evaluation and Classification Program, and the perception of intoxication and impairment. Also joining us via teleconference at 10 o'clock, I've been told, will be Mr. Paul Harris, representing the NRC. Mr. Harris is currently the NRC's Senior Program Manager responsible for policy, rulemaking, and guidance development associated with the drug and alcohol testing provisions in 10 CFR Part 26, Fitness for Duty programs. And I'm also aware that Mr. Harris will be supported by a number of other staff at the U.S. NRC, as well as a number of experts from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and they should all be on the line, we expect, around 10 o'clock.
I think we already have Mr. Flegel and Mr. Lodico from the U.S. Department of Health on the line. Can you confirm if you're on the line?
Yes, we are.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And this is Paul Harris from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we are on the line as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harris.
Good news. I'll now hand the presentation over to Ms. Owen Whitred.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Karen Owen Whitred. I'm the Director of the Regulatory Framework Division. We are here today to request that REGDOC-2.2.4, Fitness for Duty, be approved for publication and for use by CNSC staff in assessing the acceptability of licensees' fitness for duty provisions. The origins of the project go back to 2009. At a commission meeting following the publication of RD-204, Certification of Persons Working at Nuclear Power Plants, the Commission identified fitness for duty as an area that required additional clarity. Before turning the presentation over to Monsieur Bouchard, who will discuss the document in detail, I will briefly review where REGDOC-2.2.4 is situated within the CNSC's regulatory document framework. To enhance accessibility of our regulatory expectations, the CNSC structures our regulatory documents according to the framework shown here. This slide shows where REGDOC-2.2.4 fits into the CNSC's broader document framework. We have highlighted Section 2.2, Human Performance Management, as that is where this REGDOC resides. Fitness for duty is going to be addressed in two different regulatory documents. The first part, REGDOC-2.2.4, Fitness for Duty, Managing Worker Fatigue, was published on March 21st, 2017, and that topic is not included in this broader document. Together, the two REGDOC-2.2.4 documents will provide a thorough overview of the CNSC's regulatory expectations related to fitness for duty. During today's presentation, CNSC staff will identify the rationale for the REGDOC and its goals, provide an overview of the REGDOC's contents, and discuss how the REGDOC strengthens fitness for duty. Staff will describe the public consultation process and also identify some key themes from the comments received. Of particular interest for stakeholders were provisions related to alcohol and drug testing, as well as medical and psychological evaluations. The presentation will close with a short discussion on implementation, followed by staff's conclusions and our recommendation to the Commission to approve the REGDOC for publication. REGDOC 2.2.4 requirements apply only to high security sites, which is defined in the nuclear security regulations as a nuclear power plant or a nuclear facility where Category 1 or 2 nuclear material is processed, used, or stored. Category 1 and 2 nuclear materials are defined based on the type of substance and the amounts of that substance present at a facility. This slide outlines the locations of Canada's 7 high-security sites. The types of facilities and activities at these sites include operating nuclear power plants, with their associated spent fuel management facilities at the Pointe-le-Pro, Gentilly-2, Darlington, Pickering, and Bruce sites, as well as the operating research reactor and spent fuel management at the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories Chalk River site, and spent fuel management at its White Shell Laboratories facility in Manitoba, and the Douglas Point facility on the Bruce site. The REGDOC has been written to clarify the CNSC's position on fitness for duty and to provide associated, clear, risk-informed, and enforceable requirements that will support consistency in licensing and compliance activities across Canada. The REGDOC also clearly identifies the regulated population, including which requirements apply to which work groups. The document contains requirements and guidance related to medical, psychological, and occupational fitness of workers at high security sites, as well as alcohol and drug-related aspects, including testing. The document will provide regulatory clarity, strengthen the fitness for duty regulatory framework, and ensure that the fitness for duty of workers is managed for the purposes of nuclear safety and security. The document is consistent with the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, expectations to have nuclear facilities address fitness for duty. I would now like to turn the presentation over to Monsieur André Bouchard.
Thank you, Karen. In moving forward with the Commission instruction to bring clarity around fitness for duty, staff define fitness for duty as a condition in which workers are physically, physiologically, and psychologically capable of competently and safely performing their task. This broad definition encompasses all aspects of fitness and describes the purpose of being fit as one of the elements that supports workers' performance. It is important that a comprehensive approach capturing all 5 elements of fitness for duty risks be established. On the left, with the box frame in green, are risks related to fatigue. This risk is addressed in the newly published REGDOC-2.2.4 Managing Workers' Fatigue and will not be discussed, as we said earlier, here today. The proposed REGDOC 2.2.4 Fitness for Duty presented here today addresses the box framed in blue, capturing the 4 remaining risks elements: medical, psychological, occupational fitness, and alcohol and drug usage. Together, these 2 REGDOCs will form comprehensive requirements addressing all risks that are part of fitness for duty in an effort to reduce the likelihood of human error that could be caused by potentially unfit workers. The next slide provides a representation of how fitness for duty is assessed. To assess fitness for duty, it is important to have a clear fitness for duty assessment framework. The left vertical portion of this figure represents the components of a comprehensive fitness for duty assessment framework. On the horizontal lower portion of this figure are the circumstances in which a fitness for duty assessment may be conducted and range from pre-placement to random. Any fitness for duty component may be combined with a specific circumstance to define the assessment approach adopted. For example, an applicant can be subject to pre-placement medical assessments. The outcome of a fitness for duty assessment will be a determination of whether the worker is fit with work restriction, or unfit. This determination may be permanent or temporary. Details regarding the components and circumstances included in the regulatory document will be covered later in this presentation. In order to prevent unreasonable risks to the safety and security of nuclear workforce, the public, the environment, comprehensive fitness for duty assessments are needed to manage risks associated with fitness for duty. This slide provides an overview of the provisions of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act and its regulations that provides a legal basis related to fitness for duty. As you will see later in the presentation, the CNSC's legal basis was raised as a key concern during the consultation process. As indicated in the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, an object of the Commission is to regulate the nuclear industry in order to prevent unreasonable risks. As such, the Commission may establish classes of licenses and will not issue a license unless, in the opinion of the Commission, adequate provisions are made. A license may contain any terms or condition that the Commission considers necessary for the purpose of the Act. Furthermore, the General Nuclear Safety and Control Regulations requires licensee to ensure the presence of a sufficient number of qualified workers. In order for these workers to perform their work competently and safely, they must be fit. The Nuclear Security Regulation, as part of the authorization process for nuclear security officers, requires medical, psychological, and physical fitness assessments. Certificates must certify that the person is able to perform their task. Finally, a license condition already exists for the licensee to have a human performance program in place. The current REGDOC would be one of those measures under the program of human performance. But what kind of measures are in place now? High security sites licensees have implemented fitness to duty measures for many years. The CNSC has had a number of requirements and guidance in place as well. However, some of these requirements were high level and needed further details. G323, which is minimum shift complement, and RD-204, operator certification, contains requirements and guidance for a licensee to have a fitness to duty program in place. However, both documents do not describe in details what are fitness to duty programs and what they include. Detailed requirements are specified in the CSA N293 fire protection for nuclear power plant, which includes fitness requirements for emergency responders. In addition, specific fitness for duty requirements currently exist in two documents, RD-363, which applies to nuclear security officers, and REGDOC-2.2.4, which apply to the nuclear response force members. And of course, REGDOC-2.2.4, Managing Worker Fatigue, was recently published and addresses fatigue management. In REGDOC-2.2.4 Fitness Duty, if approved for publication, the existing regulatory document listed on this slide will be updated to reference the Fitness for Duty REGDOC where appropriate. It should be noted that the entire content of RD-363 for nuclear security officers related to their fitness for duty has been amalgamated into the proposed regulatory document. Therefore, RD-363 will be superseded by the Fitness for Duty REGDOC once it is fully implemented. With all these requirements, one could ask, what is the rationale for bringing forward a Fitness for Duty REGDOC now? Workers are key contributors to the safety and security of nuclear facilities. Recognizing this, the CNSC requires licensees to implement and maintain human performance programs. These programs addresses a broad range of factors that affect human performance with the aim of minimizing the potential for errors that could affect nuclear safety and security. Fitness for duty is one of the factors that can impact workers' performance. Therefore, risks associated with fitness for duty must be managed. The CNSC has a proactive regulatory approach which means that it addresses potential issues before they cause events or accidents. Following this approach, staff is proposing a REGDOC that addresses all elements of fitness for duty with the objective of supporting workers to perform their duties safely. Last but not least, the proposed REGDOC will provide transparent, consistent, and risk-informed requirements that amalgamates, clarify, and update existing requirements. To support international best practices, peer review missions are organized by the IEA to assess its country members against best practices. In the recent past, Canada was the host of 3 of these peer missions. The 2 listed on the slide, as well as an Operation Safety Review Team mission at Pickering in 2016. As a result of these missions, Canada received recommendation pertaining to fitness for duty, more specifically for random alcohol and drug testing to be performed. The proposed regulatory document is consistent with these expectations and recommendations, taking into account the Canadian legislative context. I will now turn the presentation over to Linda Hunter.
Thank you, Andre. Good morning. My name is Linda Hunter. I'm a Human and Organizational Factors Specialist with the Human and Organizational Performance Division. In developing the content of REGDOC-2.2.4 Fitness for Duty, CNSC staff gathered input from a wide range of consultants and specialists, many of whom are participating today. This slide contains a list of the sources of this input, which was considered by staff in both the approach taken and some technical content in the regulatory document. Key advice was received from occupational medicine specialists, toxicologists, alcohol and drug policy specialists, exercise physiologists, as well as experts from Health Canada and the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Staff also consulted various other sources and reviewed a large amount of scientific literature. Several reports were commissioned by the CNSC. A list of these reports can be found in the appendix slide at the end of this presentation. Staff are confident that the regulatory document has a strong scientific foundation. In addition to expert advice, CNSC staff conducted extensive benchmarking. Detailed results are discussed later in the presentation. Staff collected data regarding nuclear practices internationally, as well as data on other safety-sensitive industries in Canada. Key informant interviews were conducted, as well as policy reviews, literature searches, and case law reviews. International expectations were also reviewed. The IAEA has expectations related to fitness for duty in many documents. The proposed regulatory document is consistent with these expectations. These include the need for policy statements on fitness for duty, for medical assessments to be conducted at recruitment and periodically for operations staff, having a program to identify workers with a tendency towards drug and alcohol abuse, and behavioral observation. As domestic and international practices continue to evolve, staff revisited benchmarking data several times throughout the consultation process. Staff has consulted extensively on this regulatory document. Public consultation occurred in 2 phases. Engagement on fitness for duty began in 2012 with the public consultation on discussion paper DIS-12-03, Fitness for Duty, Proposals for Strengthening Alcohol and Drug Policy Programs and Testing. The discussion paper presented CNSC's broad view of fitness for duty and included specific proposals for alcohol and drug policy programs and testing requirements. The CNSC received 44 submissions from a variety of stakeholders, totaling over 300 pages. A What We Heard report was published in the fall of 2013. While REGDOC-2.2.4 fitness for duty was being developed, CNSC staff continued to engage stakeholders. Presentations were made to a variety of forums, including as part of the CNSC 101 sessions, which are used to educate the public on the CNSC's robust regulatory framework, program, and activities. A draft version of REGDOC 2.2.4 was issued for public consultation in November 2015. In total, the CNSC received 26 submissions from unions, licensees, third-party experts, testing companies, industry associations, the general public, and the Canadian Human Rights Commission, amounting to 325 pages of comments. In addition, all stakeholders who submitted comments were invited to further discuss any remaining areas of concern or clarification. Teleconferences were held with several licensees, unions, and testing companies. Staff gained a better understanding of stakeholder positions, and all comments were carefully considered. Staff are confident that sufficient and meaningful stakeholder consultations have occurred. The next slide provides an overview of key stakeholder comments. The four key concerns raised were the need for a regulatory document on fitness for duty, the legality of random and pre-placement alcohol and drug testing, some specific technical aspects of the assessment process and alcohol and drug testing methodologies, and finally, the worker population subject to psychological and medical assessments was an area of concern. The next 4 slides will go through these in detail. The first concern that emerged during public consultation is that licensees and unions questioned the need for a regulatory document and stated that existing measures in place were adequate. Concerns were also raised regarding implementation, stating that implementation may take many years of union negotiation and litigation. CNSC staff's position remains that the oversight of fitness for duty requires strengthening. This initiative is part of the CNSC's continual improvement of its regulatory framework, and the CNSC does not wait until events occur to act to strengthen an area important to safety. Having strong fitness for duty provisions in place reduces the risk of human performance failures and ensures that expectations related to fitness for duty are transparent, consistent, and enforceable. CNSC staff acknowledge that there may be implementation challenges, which will likely impact the implementation period. The second concern, unions and licensees express concern regarding the legal basis for random and pre-placement alcohol and drug testing, and indicated human rights and privacy rights may be violated. With respect to the legal basis, CNSC staff's response is that the Nuclear Safety and Control Act provides a clear legal basis for the Commission to set license conditions and to require any term or condition that the Commission considers necessary to prevent unreasonable risk to the environment and to the health and safety of persons. Based on comments received and in consideration of the balance between nuclear safety and security and human and privacy rights, the population of workers subject to random and pre-placement alcohol and drug testing has been considerably reduced. From all with unescorted access proposed in the discussion paper to only a subset of workers with the most direct and immediate impact on safety. A description of these workers will be provided later in the presentation. This change is in line with comments received from the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which emphasize the importance of limiting alcohol and drug testing to workers in safety-sensitive positions. Furthermore, additional information on privacy and the employer's duty to accommodate workers was also added to the regulatory document in response to comments received. With respect to the third area of concern, a variety of stakeholders raised concerns regarding some of the technical aspects of the assessment processes and testing methodologies. To address comments, several changes were made to the regulatory document, in consideration of best practices and expert advice. For example, clarity was added regarding the outcome of workers who test positive for alcohol and drugs. The regulatory document now clearly states that workers shall be removed from safety-sensitive duties and referred to a mandatory substance abuse evaluation. In addition, some minor changes to the list of drugs and thresholds were made based on Canadian practices, and clarity was added to the glossary of terms. In the fourth and final area, stakeholders raised concerns that the scope of psychological and medical assessments is too broad. Stakeholders stated that they support the current obligation to assess security staff, but do not believe expanding it to other roles would demonstrably improve existing fitness for duty programs. With respect to psychological assessments, recent data indicates that 20 to 30% of Canadians will experience mental health illness in their lifetime. Given that psychological assessments are to be tailored based on job performance requirements and are commensurate with the roles and responsibilities of each work group, CNSC staff's position remains that psychological assessments are reasonable measures to ensure nuclear safety. In addition to existing security personnel, psychological assessments would be limited to certified staff pre-placement or for a cause when a mental health concern is suspected or identified. Medical assessments would be expanded to safety-sensitive positions. Given that safety-sensitive positions are those workers where impaired performance could result in a significant incident, CNSC staff believe this to be reasonable and is consistent with domestic and international practices. In summary, extensive stakeholder consultation has occurred throughout the development of REGDOC-2.2.4 fitness for duty. The consultation was significant, and stakeholder comments were carefully considered and resulted in significant changes to the regulatory document where appropriate. For example, the population of workers subject to random alcohol and drug testing was substantially reduced. We will now turn to the content of the regulatory document. The regulatory document includes programmatic requirements, which are in line with licensee management systems. These program elements are also consistent with those contained in the Managing Worker Fatigue regulatory document. They include the requirement for licensees to have fitness for duty policy statements, a program, and processes to manage fitness for duty, with clear authorities, accountabilities, and responsibilities, and a requirement for licensees to assess and strive to continually improve their fitness for duty program. In addition, supervisory awareness and peer observation and reporting is included. A supervisory awareness program is already required under the nuclear security regulations. In its correspondence to the CNSC, the Canadian Human Rights Commission emphasized the importance of including a focus on employee support programs, including worker awareness and education, supervisory awareness, and employee assistance programs. Each of these measures have been included in the regulatory document. Staff's position is that these non-punitive measures to support workers are key elements of an effective fitness for duty program. Similar to the Managing Worker Fatigue regulatory document, this document takes a graded approach to the requirements that apply to workers at high security sites, depending on their potential impact on safety and security. As can be seen in the graphic on the right, the largest circle represents the broad population, that is, those workers with the potential to pose a risk to nuclear safety or security. This population is estimated at approximately 12,000 workers. It should be noted that this estimate of numbers of workers on all of the estimates of workers on the slide are very approximate and based on nuclear power plant data which represents approximately 5 of the 7 sites. The medium circle represents a smaller set of workers occupying safety-sensitive positions. That is, those workers whose impaired performance could result in a significant incident. These include certified staff, some security, minimum staff complement, and any other safety-sensitive positions identified by licensees using a risk-informed analysis. This population is estimated at approximately 4,500 workers, or 37% of the broad population. And the smallest circle represents a small subset of safety-sensitive positions, which have the most direct and immediate effect on safety and security, estimated at 900 workers, or 8% of the broad population. The requirements are graded in that the level of prescription varies with the most prescriptive measures, that is pre-placement and random alcohol and drug testing, being limited to the smallest number of workers commensurate with risk. The next few slides will describe the requirements associated with each of these worker populations in more detail. For the largest population of workers, licensees are required to manage the fitness for duty of workers through the program elements in their management system. For these workers, a regulatory document does not require specific assessments or tests, but rather licensees are required to have measures in place that address the full set of fitness for duty risks. We will now turn to an overview of requirements applicable to safety-sensitive positions. In addition to program elements, licensees would be required to identify medical, psychological, and occupational fitness requirements for safety-sensitive positions. These would be based on the worker's job performance requirements. However, the CNSC has already identified some workgroup-specific assessments and tests that would be required. Medical, psychological, and occupational fitness assessments and tests included in the regulatory document are existing requirements for nuclear security officers and have been expanded in some cases to other workers in safety-sensitive positions. These assessments would be job-specific and based on job performance requirements. There are also new requirements pertaining to alcohol and drug testing and substance abuse evaluations. I will now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Erin Derouin, who will go through the specific assessments and tests required by workgroup.
Thank you, Linda. My name is Erin Derwin, and I'm a human factors specialist within the Human and Organizational Performance Division. Currently, medical assessments are required for select nuclear security positions, such as nuclear security officers. In addition, emergency response team members are required to meet medical requirements in N293 fire protection for nuclear power plants. The draft regulatory document proposes to expand the requirement for medical assessments to all other safety-sensitive positions. These would be conducted pre-placement, periodically at intervals defined by the licensee, and for cause under reasonable grounds conditions. The requirement to extend medical assessments to all safety-sensitive positions beyond nuclear security and emergency response teams was based on occupying a safety-sensitive position at a high-security nuclear facility and on benchmarking. Given that these assessments are to be tailored according to the worker's job performance requirements, it is staff's position that the requirement to be medically assessed at pre-placement and periodically is reasonable, given that these workers hold safety-sensitive positions and by definition are those workers where impaired performance could result in a significant incident at a high-security nuclear facility. With respect to benchmarking, the IEEA expects that pre-placement and periodic medical assessments are conducted for all operations staff. Transport Canada has stringent requirements for medical assessments that are defined for each mode of transportation. Additionally, the U.S. NRC requires medical examinations for some positions, including certified staff. At the present time, psychological assessments are required for select nuclear security positions, including nuclear security officers and nuclear response force members. Draft Regulatory Document 2.2.4 proposes to expand the requirement for pre-placement psychological assessments to certified staff only. For cause reasonable grounds, psychological assessments would only be conducted on safety-sensitive positions if a mental health concern is suspected. In addition, psychological assessments will be required for security personnel that have access to weapons, if away for more than 6 months. In terms of benchmarking, the U.S. NRC requires psychological assessments for all workers with unescorted access. At the present time, occupational fitness assessments, or physical fitness tests, are required for nuclear security officers and the NRF, or Nuclear Response Force. Currently, for emergency response team members, N293 specifies that industrial fire brigades or fire protection workers have the physical fitness to meet the demands of the job. Draft REGDOC-2.2.4 proposes to expand reasonable grounds in a for-cause circumstance physical fitness testing to nuclear security officers and nuclear response force if a supervisor suspects that the worker is not capable from a physical fitness perspective of performing the job. The draft document also updates the physical fitness requirements specified in Regulatory Document 363 to match current job performance requirements, taking into consideration an update to the physical demands analysis and changes or modifications to equipment. The current and proposed physical fitness testing requirements are aligned with the requirement for law enforcement officers and first responders in Canada to meet physical fitness standards. In the next several slides, we will focus specifically on alcohol and drug testing. The proposed alcohol and drug testing requirements are new. Many of the processes proposed in relation to alcohol and drug testing in the draft RegDoc were developed based on expert advice from 2 forensic toxicologists and in consultation with other specialists from Health Canada and the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse. The draft regulatory document proposes that all safety-sensitive positions be required to submit to reasonable grounds testing, primarily based on supervisors' observations, post-incident testing following a significant incident, follow-up testing after a worker has been confirmed as substance dependent, and return to work testing prior to the substance dependent worker being reinstated to safety-sensitive duties. Based on a graded, risk-informed approach and in consideration of the comments received from stakeholders, the proposed worker population that will be subject to pre-placement and random alcohol and drug testing has been substantially reduced. Only CNSC certified staff, as specified in RD-204, and nuclear response force members would be subject to these circumstances of testing. As these positions, based on their job performance requirements, have the most direct and immediate impact on nuclear safety and security. For clarification, pre-placement testing is typically conducted as part of the conditions of an applicant prior to hire or when transferring to a safety-sensitive position. And random testing occurs on an unannounced basis. The regulatory document proposes to test 25% of this subset of workers on an annual basis. CNSC staff are confident that the restriction of random testing to the most safety-significant positions at Canada's high-security nuclear facilities strikes the right balance between respecting human rights and privacy and strengthening nuclear safety and security. In the summary side, the proposed regulatory document builds on existing requirements and practices already in place for fitness for duty assessments. Medical, psychological, and occupational fitness requirements have been in place for some years now. The proposed REGDOC for these components only extends the worker population to a larger group of safety-sensitive positions. The proposed alcohol and drug testing requirements represent a new component within the CNSC's regulatory framework, as detailed in draft REGDOC-2.2.4, fitness for duty. Finally, behavioral performance observation has been a requirement in the nuclear security regulations for a long time and is an existing practice of licensees. Behavioral observation represents an essential component of a comprehensive approach to fitness for duty. The objective of this slide is to provide some perspective on current practices in Canada with regard to alcohol and drug testing. Since the 1990s, the United States Department of Transportation, or US DOT, established fitness for duty requirements for Canadian motor carriers traveling into the United States. These Canadian drivers are subject to all circumstances of alcohol and drug testing, including random and pre-placement testing. Recently, the Toronto Transit Commission has implemented a full set of alcohol and drug testing requirements, including random and pre-placement testing for approximately 10,000 workers. The table also includes other employers in various Canadian industries that have included testing as part of their policies and programs. Based on results from a survey conducted by the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse on behalf of the CNSC, 55% of the 73 respondents from Canadian workplaces conduct some form of alcohol and/or drug testing, with 12% of respondents indicating that they perform random testing of safety-sensitive positions. From the literature, the main reasons that employers may wish or want to establish a drug testing program are to minimize the likelihood of industrial accidents and to deter drug use in the workplace. As highlighted in the previous slide, 3 international peer review missions to Canada have provided recommendations that Canada do more to strengthen fitness for duty, specifically with respect to alcohol and drug testing. The basis for these recommendations were good international practice. Internationally, random alcohol and drug testing is practiced in various countries. Some countries have regulatory requirements that require testing, while in other countries, it is the nuclear operators themselves that have adopted random testing as a good practice. Some countries require that all workers with unescorted access or site access be subject to random testing. These 2 types of access are generally the same, as they refer to a broad population of workers that do not require an escort to access protected areas of the nuclear facility. In addition to the benchmarking provided on the previous slides, positive test data available from the US NRC and Canadian-based alcohol and drug testing statistics are insightful. The figure on the right is data from the US NRC from the years 1990 to 2013, as displayed on the x-axis, with the percent positive test rate displayed on the y-axis. All testing circumstances are presented from pre-placement to post-event. 2 things are evident from this figure. First, the green line indicates over the last 22 years that there's been a significant decline in the positive test rate in for-cause testing circumstance. This is testing that occurs when there are reasonable grounds to believe a worker may be impaired. Second, all other positive test rates included are relatively stable, with random rates approximately at 0.3%. Despite the fact that positive test results for random have been stable, 19% of all positive tests were recently identified in 2013 through random testing. Taken together, these data support the need for a comprehensive approach that includes all forms of alcohol and drug testing. In this graph, we present Canadian industry data provided by one of the largest third-party testing providers in Canada. The red bars in the figure represent the percent positive random test rate data for Canadian-based drivers who must meet the U.S. Department of Transportation regulations, which are labeled as DOT or DOT. The blue bars represent other Canadian workers or Canadian industry workers that are not required to meet U.S. regulations and are referred to here as non-DOT. The most noticeable difference is that the non-DOT workers in Canada have substantially higher random positive test rates compared to Canadian drivers that are subject to US DOT regulations. While these differences may be attributed to many factors, it is evident that regulated industries have much lower random test rates. In the US, all Department of Transportation agencies use a 1% positive test rate for random as a performance indicator, as indicated by the black dashed line on the graph. This is used to determine whether or not to modify the sampling rate for the random test pool. The sampling rate may be reduced if this rate is below 1% for 2 years, or increased if above 1%. For example, the US NRC initially tested 100% of their workers and reduced their sampling rate to 50% in 1994, as illustrated on the graph using the green line. This slide and the next are meant to present data on the most frequently used drugs in the US and Canada. This graph presents US NRC positive test data, with the x-axis again from years 1990 to 2013. The y-axis is the percentage of positive tests by substances tested. As indicated by the blue line, marijuana is the most commonly used drug and accounts for approximately between 55 and 73% of all positive drug tests in the US NRC's workforce. A distant second is cocaine, represented by the green line. These are followed by amphetamines, opiates, and PCP. This graph of data from one of Canada's largest testing providers again shows the same trend in Canada, as shown in the previous US NRC slide, with the highest percentage of positive tests for marijuana, followed by cocaine. Data is presented for both Canadian DOT regulated workers and non-DOT workers from 2011 to 2015. In Canada, data from the Canadian Tobacco, Alcohol, and Drug Survey indicates that the reported use of marijuana by Canadians has increased from 11% in 2013 to 12% in 2015, and this is anticipated to increase with the legalization of marijuana. A recent survey indicated that 83% of respondents from various Canadian employers with more than 500 employees are very concerned with respect to the potential impact of marijuana legalization on workplace safety. This slide provides some insights into the potential impacts of medical and recreational use of marijuana. In Canada, data over the last few years indicates that medical marijuana use is on the rise, which is partly due to changes to legislation surrounding medical access. In addition, the general public's perceived risk of harms associated with marijuana use is decreasing. With the legalization of marijuana for recreational use scheduled for next year, it is important that we draw on lessons learned from other jurisdictions where marijuana has been legalized. To look into potential impacts of legalization, CNSC staff have established a memorandum of understanding with the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse, or CCSA. The CCSA examined the experience of 2 states within the U.S., Colorado and Washington, that have legalized marijuana for recreational use in 2012. The CCSA findings suggest that the legalization of marijuana is associated with increased use. To balance this risk, the onus is on employers and regulators to ensure a safe workplace by taking all and every reasonable measure or precaution to ensure safety. It is estimated that approximately 10 to 13% of Canadians use or abuse drugs. It is therefore prudent that employers, particularly those in safety-sensitive industries, address drugs of abuse that are known to be impairing, as these can have an impact on safety, whether legal or illegal. With respect to other regulators in Canada, Transport Canada considers the use of marijuana, whether for medical purposes or not, to be disqualifying for safety-sensitive positions. According to Transport Canada, abstinence of 4 to 6 weeks would be required prior to a pilot being considered as fit for duty. And for rail workers in safety-critical positions, the presence of marijuana in the body renders the worker unfit. CNSC staff position is that given potential impacts of these societal changes, a proactive approach must be taken to strengthen the oversight of fitness for duty. I will now pass the presentation back to Karen, who will discuss the implementation of the regulatory document.
If approved, REGDOC-2.2.4, Fitness for Duty, will be published on the CNSC's website following the Commission's decision. Upon this publication, REGDOC-2.2.4 will be added to the Recommendations and Guidance section of the applicable License Conditions Handbook, commonly referred to as LCHs. CNSC staff continuously engage with licensees on the implementation of REGDOCs, and as such would require the submission of implementation plans and associated timelines specific to REGDOC 2.2.4 by all applicable licensees. The implementation plan would drive the transition of REGDOC 2.2.4 from recommendations and guidance to compliance verification criteria. The target date for implementation would be captured in the compliance verification criteria in the LCH. CNSC staff will monitor licensees' implementation during ongoing regulatory oversight activities and update the Commission annually on the status of REGDOC implementation via the regulatory oversight reports. In summary, the CNSC has taken a proactive approach to ensure nuclear safety and security. The REGDOC was developed through extensive research, expert advice, and multiple consultations with stakeholders. In combination with the Managing Worker Fatigue document, the REGDOC addresses all components and circumstances of fitness for duty. Stakeholder feedback was carefully reviewed, and changes were made to the document in full consideration of considered risks, science, and benchmarking. CNSC staff believe that the REGDOC's graded approach finds an appropriate balance between human rights and nuclear safety and security. As part of the continual improvement of the CNSC's regulatory framework, this regulatory document will ensure that requirements and guidance related to fitness for duty, including alcohol and drug testing, are transparent, consistent, and documented. The regulatory document would also fulfill international expectations and recommendations pertaining to fitness for duty and alcohol and drug use. Specifically, REGDOC 2.2.4 strengthens and modernizes the CNSC's fitness for duty regulatory oversight, balances relative risks posed by various facilities and worker positions with measures to ensure fitness for duty is effectively managed, improves clarity of CNSC expectations and provides a consistent basis for licensing and compliance, and takes a non-punitive approach by including supportive measures for workers and emphasizes the duty to accommodate. Based on the contents of this presentation and of the extensive work and consultation that has gone into developing the document, CNSC staff believe that REGDOC 2.2.4 Fitness for Duty is ready for final approval and publication, with one minor change, namely the exclusion of certified health physicists from the pre-placement and random alcohol and drug testing worker population. Thank you for your attention, and we remain available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.